There's a great philosopher, a British philosopher from the 17th century, Thomas Hobbes, that he coined the phrase, man is wolf to man. So I was becoming that to my own family. I was the wolf of my own family. And when I saw all the damage that I was doing to them, I started my own spiritual journey, my own transformational path, my own transformational journey to be a better person and to see the things that I needed to see that were setting me apart from my family.
What were the questions that opened things up for you or helped you pivot?
A coach that had a strong background ontological thinking, and he asked me once, Pablo, do you know why you think the way you think? And I just went bananas.
Welcome to the Spirituality in Leadership podcast. I'm Andrew Cohn. Spirituality in Leadership is a platform for conversations with leaders at all levels about bringing our spiritual dimensions to our leadership, our teams, our workplaces, and all areas of our lives in order to achieve greater success and fulfillment and build and sustain healthier organizations. If you'd like to connect with me to talk further about these topics and or about individual or team coaching, leadership workshops, or team alignment, please go to my website, lighthouseteams.com. Enjoy the podcast.
Welcome back to the Spirituality and Leadership podcast. I am so pleased to be joined today by Pablo Sillas Domínguez in beautiful Monterrey, Mexico. And I've talked a little bit about your background in the introduction to this podcast, so we don't need to get into that too much other than your vast experience. Well, more important than your experience, your learning and your wisdom. It's not just about your work experience, but it's about your mindset and it's about your heartset, which is what I think we'll focus on. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. And I'm very pleased to be here in your space with you and your audience. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Of course, it's great to be with you. And, I'd love to talk a little bit, maybe we could start a bit with your journey personally and professionally, because we will focus our conversation on Heartset, your book. But there's a lot in your experience that went into that book. And I know because I've read it. So maybe we could talk a little bit about your journey and how you came to write the book, and then we can talk about some of the key themes.
Great, Andrew. Well, first of all, the journey started many years ago I was born in Monterrey, Mexico. It's a town like 2-hour drive away from the Texas border. And I was raised by my mom and dad, which came across very difficult economic times back in those days. And I learned from them the value of the discipline, the value of the mindset of continuous improvement and working hard to be someone in life. And from that mindset, that was not very different from the mindset that was going around the culture and society in Mexico or even all over the world. I ended up studying my engineering degree at the Tech in Monterrey. And I studied industrial engineer because basically I thought to myself that I was good in math, but that wasn't really my passion. So I ended up with my studies, with my degree, and my first job, Andrew, was in the sales force in a big company, in a Fortune 100 company, working in the sales department. And I got an invitation from a peer, from a colleague from the HR department, from the talent and culture department. You will never hear from me human resources and I will go in a little bit in that term. We are not resources, we are persons. So the HR department, which is human relations department, gave me an invitation to work with them. And that's when I started my career interacting with people and knowing the value of giving ourselves for the well-being and for the benefit and for the growth and the potential of the people that surround us. So I loved being in that department, in HR, in human relations. And then many good incidences passed in my life, not coincidence, but good incidents, because our things are connected for the common good and for the well-being of everyone. And I started to move around in different companies. So I quickly became a generalist of HR. in which I managed all of the different departments or areas that the functions provides to a company. And at an early stage in my life, I was, I believe, 27 years old or 28 years old. I became an HR director. So I tasted success very early in my career. And that had pros and cons, because the pros were that I was earning money and I was having more responsibility and I was making a difference in the company for the common good and for the wealth of our employees, of our associates. But the cons were that I was separating from my family because I really was a workaholic. Mm. And what I needed to see, because I was totally immersed in my work and being more applaud from my colleagues at work that I was cherished and applaud from my own family. And that way of thinking, that mindset, stayed with me for many, many years, Andrew, until I had kids and I saw the damage that I was doing to my kids and to my wife, that I was doing to my own blood in terms of the mindset that I have of being competitive and earning more money and growing in the corporate ladder and having more responsibilities and traveling overseas. I was not able to see the damage that I was doing to my own family. There is a great a British philosopher from the 17th century, Thomas Hobbes, that he coined the phrase, man is wolf to man. So I was becoming that to my own family. I was the wolf of my own family. And when I saw all the damage that I was doing to them, I started my own spiritual journey, my own transformational path, my own transformational journey to be a better person and to see the things that I needed to see that were setting me apart from my family. I didn't know at that time, Andrew, why I think the way I think and why I felt the way I felt. So when I finally, through my spiritual path, I answered those questions, that's when I woke up in terms of the common good, starting with myself and my family, and then for the rest of the people that surrounds me. And that's when I came and write a book about Heartset.
I thank you for sharing that. And just something you just said, I'd like to ask about that. When you said, when you answered those questions, things shifted for you. Could you articulate, if you can, what questions? What were the questions that opened things up for you or helped you pivot?
The main question was that I had a coach. Okay, a coach that had a strong background ontological thinking. And he asked me once, Pablo, do you know why you think the way you think? And I just went bananas.
It's a great question.
And I told him, of course not. I mean, I've never in my life have asked me that question to myself. So he told me, okay, you have a lot of work. You have a lot of homework. Go to your house, go to your home, talk with your wife, talk with your kids, talk with the persons that can give you a lot of feedback of yourself. Do some reading and get some outside information that can help you answer that question, because you have your own mindset, totally egocentric on your narcissistic being. So you need outside information of the people that you really love, so they can tell you the way that they perceive your actions, the way that they perceive your feelings, your thoughts, your emotions, the way you behave, and start to meditate on those questions, on those answers, and try to go back also. Why your parents tell you the things that they told you in order to educate you? What's the mindset in which you grew? What's the mindset in which you acquire from your early days back in school, back in your career, back with your friends? So take a deep dive, an introspective dive to know yourself. You need to know yourself in order to answer that question. And it took me, Andrew, I don't know. I think that it was a process like about 1 year or 2 years in which I constantly went back and forth because, I mean, that question, you can answer it forever because it's a continuous improvement process in your life. The transformation never ends. So basically, when you answer that question, you can always come up with something different. So when I answered that question, now my coach gave me a new one. Now tell me why you feel the way you feel.
Mm-hmm.
And I went back again to listen to my body, to listen to the illness that I have in my body, to listen to my aches, to my pain, to my scars, to take a look at my shadows, to take a look at and start to listen to my intuition, and no one ever taught me how to embrace and to develop my intuition or my emotional wisdom. So I came back to him with that answer, and that's when a lot of possibilities open up in my life. That's when I started to feel different. That's when I started to learn about my own soul, my own spirit, which are different things. And that's when I started to embrace the pain of the people that surround me as my own pain. And that's when I started to grow, and this transformational process eventually erupted like a volcano in my book, Heartset.
Mm. Wow, you're really saying a lot. What you shared about those questions, it reminds me, one of my earlier podcast guests shared a quotation with me by the American, I think theologian would be the best description, Parker Palmer, who said, "And if you choose to live an unexamined life, please do not work with people."
That's a good one.
Right? Because this is what it's about. So you're talking about your own personal awareness, how that evolved. You're talking about once you became more clear about that, recognizing the impact on others and the need. It's like, as you said, it's mindset plus otherness, plus the focus on others, and not being limited to just myself and my own myopic, self-centered view. Wow. Okay. So there's a lot that you're talking about. There's a lot of places we can go. And what I'd like to do maybe is just zoom out and say, why don't we start with a kind of an overview of what your ideas that have distilled into the book. Kind of where would you start in describing what Heartset is and how it emerged from this journey that you've discussed?
Okay, well, my personal journey that I previously discussed, Andrew, also has a great implications in the way that society thinks. I mean, I'm not the only one that passed through these situations in my life with all of my shadows and scars. And I mean, it's a cultural thing that it's driving the way that we see humanity and the way that we perceive ourselves as human beings.
And in the book, you talk about it as the system. You use that word system very strongly.
Of the cultural matrix, because one way or another, we have been raised only on depending on our reason. We have three great capabilities in our essence as human beings: our reason, our emotions, and our intuition. And since René Descartes, the famous philosopher, French philosopher from the 18th century, 16th century, 17th century, in which we fragmented the way we see ourselves, we only depend on our reason to evolve as human beings. And if we add to that the Darwinian socialism, in which that we need to adapt only by competing against each other, we have created the type of world in which we live in, with a lot of extreme poverty, with a lot of ignorance, dogmatism, fear, and hate. And we can see that, and we can see also a lot of problems. And the statistics are out there. I mean, we just need to take a look at World Organization talks about chronic stress, what the rate of suicides, the rate of depression, the rate of heart attacks. I mean, we have a lot of problems in the society currently going on all over the world. Even there is a great graph that I expose in the book of the International Monetary Fund, in which 5 of the countries in the whole planet account for more than 50% of the GDP. So I mean, what I was living in my family, it's part of a bigger picture that's going on in the world. So that's the first part of the book, exposing why we think the way we think in terms of the data, of the KPIs that we are producing in the way we think, the way we do. And I also take in account in the first part of the book, which is called the ego, okay? our ego produces this output of KPIs of the structural things that were going on in the world, and move on to the second part of the book, which is the self. And I just gave also in the first part, in the ego, I exposed, for example, one thing that really raised my attention. The World Economic Forum every 5 years have their annual meeting in Davos, and they published the main competencies in which society, companies, professionals need to work on to be a better professional, a better company, to be more competitive, and to drive progress, which progress is completely different of well-being. And in that competencies, for example, for 2025, they came up with the following: problem solving, coordinating with others, people management, critical thinking, negotiation, quality control, self-orientation, decision-making, active listening, and creativity. And I mean, one of the points that I established in the first part of the book is that they are missing half of the equation, because those competencies are driving the mindset that is overwhelming the world in the KPIs that we currently have as a society, with extreme poverty and a lot of the chronic stress that we are going through. And they forget half of that picture, which is, for example, ethics, solidarity, respect, honesty, vulnerability, listening, empathy, wisdom, emotions, introspection, reflection, meditation, prayer, contemplation, generosity, kindness. I mean, there's a half of the story that in the current mindset of the system, we are not knowing about it, because we don't go to ourselves to an introspective process to really answer the question why we think the way we think. So the first part of the book, Andrew, it's based on answering that question with a lot of that can drive us to think differently and to reflect the type of life that we're currently having. And the second part of the book, the self, is a journey of discovering our true self, discovering our intuition, discovering our best version that we can possibly have in this life, in this incarnation. And I talked about a lot of tools that we can acquire in order to know yourself better, to answer the question why we think the way we think, and why we feel the way we feel, and eventually why we act the way we act, and what's the output of our actions. That's the second part of the book. And in the third part of the book, it's what I call the integration of Heartset, of awareness, of living the self with the us. And I incorporate in that third part of the book the concept of charisms, which are competencies of the spirit, and the feel thoughts, which are competencies of the soul that are put together and integrated by our own intuition. So, and by the end of the book, I try to give a framework to people to have the tools so they can have a better life, and they can do better to the people that surround us, and living Heartset and living awareness for the common good of ourselves and for the planet, obviously.
Yeah, thank you. And so when you talk about charisms, that's a word that I hadn't seen before, and I looked it up, and it means a spiritual gift, or that's the definition I saw.
Yes.
It's the same root of the word as charisma, that internal gift of sorts, spiritual gift. And maybe you'd want to talk about those 12 charisms. Would that be something to talk about a little bit? Mm-hmm.
Yes, I love that. Well, and you said it correctly, that charisms are a gift from our spirit. If you don't recognize in yourself that you have a spirit, it will be very hard for you to understand those terms and to live by those terms.
Mm.
So, for example, in the current mindset, based on extreme competitiveness and the growing of the ego, you need to take knowledge of your spirit in order to understand these terms. For example, in the current mindset, we talked about in current society of the growth of the self. The charism would add to that statement that you need to think, or we need to think, in the growth of the us, of the awareness of everyone that surrounds you, not only you. It's integrating the other part of the equation that's been left out by this Darwinism, socialism, and this reason we have been living for the past 250 years. From example, it's moving from learning from your failures to learning about the pain of the others, because we eventually end up normalizing what's not normal. It's frequent to see someone in the streets, someone with a lot of pain, someone asking for help, someone asking for a job, and we just normalize what's not normal because we tend to ignore them. So we need that charism to really incorporate in ourselves, to see each other in the people that are suffering, to embrace them and bring it into the system for the common good. It's moving from learning to grow to unlearning to become yourself. We need to unlearn a lot of things if we want to answer the question why we think the way we think, in order to open up to charisms.
And so let me just stop for, so you're talking about unlearning, which is a concept we've talked about in this podcast before. So it's, questioning our own thinking, which is what part one is all about, and what you're talking about. And if we're going to advance and bring in this other piece, we need to unlearn certain things. It reminds me of one of my favorite quotations ever from Alvin Toffler, who said the illiterate of the 21st century are not, the illiterate of the 21st century are the people who are unable to learn, unlearn, and relearn. And that's what we need to do. So if we're really questioning our thinking, we need to unlearn certain things and relearn something bigger, broader, more meaningful. That's what I'm hearing. Yes?
Totally right, Andrew, because if we are full of our reason, there's no place to learn from our emotions and our intuition. And there's no place to learn from the pain of the otherness. So we need to unlearn what we learn, because we are totally mindful of our own reason. So, that's the only way to do it, because how else will you acquire new knowledge and new ways of feel thinking yourself and feel thinking otherness in the way that you interact with the people around you? So it's a critical point in Heartset, in my Heartset methodology, to unlearn to be yourself. One other way to put it is the following. We are raised to wear different masks in the roles that we play all over our culture and social status. I have one mask when I come to work. I have another mask or personality when I'm at home, when I'm with my friends, when I'm with traveling. And that only will take us to a lot of drain in our energy. Because if you are not yourself, you need to put a lot of energy to put a different mask differently in the social event that you are currently living. So if you just be yourself, you will save a lot of energy, and you will definitely feel yourself different, and you will be able to learn different things. But you need to be yourself and stop wearing a lot of masks depending on the role that you're playing. Just be yourself no matter where you are and with who you are.
So let me ask you a question here. It's a bit of a challenging question, but an important question. These things that you're highlighting are quite aspirational. They are sort of lifelong journey types of things, as I would describe it, right? They're things that it could take me the rest of my life to learn to do this and to do it well, and it would be a life well lived. So just recognizing that these are beautiful aspirational ways to live. And many of us still work in the system. Many of us still have corporate jobs. How do we reconcile these two things? How do you advise and teach and mentor people to grow into these principles while still working in a world that is largely controlled by corporations, for better or worse? I'm not here to complain, but just to acknowledge what might be. How do you work in the system while thinking beyond the system?
That's a great question. And I'm going to obviously there's no recipe. I will go through my personal experience. and through the things that I'm currently doing. Okay. The first of all is that you need to be example of the things that you want to happen around you. You need to be example. If you are example, people will learn from you just by watching you.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to be example of something different, you really need to take in account to know yourself better. So you need to work a lot on your 5 dimensions of your body, which is the physical, the mental, the spiritual, the emotional, and the social. You need to work on those 5 dimensions, and you need to integrate the 3 great capabilities of our essence, which is reasons, emotions, and intuition. So with that framework, you can start to know yourself better, to feel yourself different, and to act differently towards the common good, and to be an example for others. And what happens when you have in front of you a boss who he or she, it's definitely a pain in the butt? Well, your example can drive her to think differently, and you can give him or her feedback, honest feedback. And if you are true to yourself, if you really are true to yourself, and you leave masks behind when you come into the office, you can say what you think with total vulnerability and with a lot of seniority. And that congruence shown by yourself in that feedback will be heard. I haven't seen anyone, Andrew, that when I open my heart in a vulnerability state, that comes and judges me and just walks away. So we practice in the system to be vulnerable and to show ourselves, our true self, with our pains and shadows and scars. We will start to drive some type of empathy in the people that surround us. And that empathy will open new channels for their own development.
One thing that I highlighted in that chapter when you were talking about vulnerability, you said showing ourselves without the masks of motivation and commitment brings us closer to the charisms of authentic human relationships that emanate from vulnerability, affection, and appreciation for otherness.
That's right. The essence is that we need to open ourselves because we were educated. The mindset in which we were educated, Andrew, was not to show our vulnerability. For example, you're a boy, don't cry. You need to be tough. Don't show your feelings. You need to always be tough. You need to be resilient. It's hurting me. I mean, I'm going through this pain, through this episode in my life with my wife, with my kids. I mean, I'm suffering. So I want to show those wounds inside the organization because no one can separate itself from work and from home. We are an individual. Individual comes from the root of indivisible. I mean, we are the same people, the same human being everywhere. And we need to show our vulnerability in the workspace in order to open empathic spaces so people can learn from that. And 9 out of 10, I have the experience that is working. 9 out of 10. And that I'm influencing in people that previously were seen as a very tough, high executive, C-level executive with no vulnerability at all. I'm seeing openness through an empathic conversation and through hearing each other as human beings, not as a resource. Because if we see ourselves as a resource, we will only be exploiting ourselves for not the common good.
And one thing you said about vulnerability, you talked about sharing with vulnerability and seniority. And I thought that was an interesting choice of words. When you talk about seniority, you're not talking about an organizational position. When you talk about seniority, you're talking more about maturity. Say more about what seniority means when you say that, please.
Seniority is it's acting on the total confidence of yourself. Of a total confidence of yourself, of knowing yourself and knowing what you're capable of and knowing what you're not capable of. But you have that inner confidence that you can tell to yourself, I'm going to eat the world and I can be anyone that I want to be. And I will draw my full potential because I believe in myself and I love myself. I accept myself. I love myself. I forgive myself. That's why I have a lot of self-confidence in myself. That's seniority.
There's a lot in there. I'm not even sure what to ask next. I'm pausing for a moment. There's so much there. Yeah. And how do you typically talk about this, especially in a work setting, because you still work in a corporate space? How do you talk about it? Do you find that you can convey some of these ideas casually and informally, one-on-ones, coffee machine, or is it necessarily something that is more suitable for some of the conferences, for example, that you host and other spaces, or maybe both? But tell me more about how this is communicated most effectively.
For example, in the workplace. In our previous conversation, I told you that I am a big fan of Fred Kaufman. And in one professional previous experience from the one that I currently having, I learned from Fred the term check-in. And in the meetings that we have, we start with a check-in. And that check-in is based only, not only, but is based mostly on a vulnerable space to talk about the things that are currently bothering you the most or making you happy the most. So, for example, we open meetings talking about the things that we loved on the previous day or on the weekend, but also on the things that hurt us on the weekend or the things that happen to us that really can drive out our attention from the meeting because we have an important thing to solve at home, or because my dad is in the hospital, or because my daughter is passing through a disease. So if we start to practice the check-in, starting by our own vulnerability, wonderful things will happen, Andrew. A lot of possibilities will open, and then suddenly people will tell you things that they never in their life have told you, and you will know them as a person, not as a professional. You will know them as a person, not as a resource. And that's and that's the real transformation and the cultural transformation that we need to drive in every company, to really see each other as persons in a vulnerability space, to work each other for the well-being of ourselves, of awareness, of the otherness, not only just in a mechanical transactional way of doing business. So we start with a check-in, and that has opened great possibilities in the way that we see each other and we embrace each other.
Some of these ideas, of course, do creep into sort of mainstream organization development. I'm thinking about vulnerability-based trust and Patrick Lencioni and the 5 dysfunctions of a team. And how do we develop trust? We're vulnerable with each other. Now, of course, that's a very difficult thing to do when philosophically we're operating in a system where we may be competing with each other. So it can be a tough hurdle. I work with a lot of teams to develop trust within teams, and often I'm finding I'm not quite as direct and bold as you are about the need to think more broadly, but bring it a little bit more gently, because just as a functional matter, whether we understand what trust means, when we experience what trust means, we know the difference. And we recognize the impact of that. But yes, it's all about being vulnerable, and that could happen in big ways. That could happen in small ways. It can happen in major ways when a senior leader is in a town hall and shares a personal story about a personal loss or something like that, and that can change the culture in a moment. Or it could be something very small if, for example, that senior leader is not comfortable being that vulnerable in front of a large group and misses out on that opportunity, but perhaps can happen in a smaller setting.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I hear what you're sharing about even in these small interactions can be very impactful. And what's interesting too is that Fred's first book, Conscious Business, was followed by his second book called The Meaning Revolution, where he's talking largely about meaning as a key leadership, I don't want to say moral competency or leadership focus. What has meaning for people at work, and to the extent that we can activate that authentically with the people in our organization, that's leadership, right? Because real leadership does not engender loyalty to the leader. It engenders loyalty to the mission or some dimension of the work that has meaning for people. I thought there was an excellent book. I actually did a review of that book on my website. But and so I appreciate the evolution of that thinking from the individual responsibility and responsibility, as Fred talks about it, and you talk about it in your book, to the larger, how can I help activate and elevate and prioritize meaning for others in the workplace?
I want to add to that the terminology of the field thoughts that I talk about in my book. I dedicated a whole chapter to the field thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
The field thoughts, it's a term in which when you start to know yourself better, you start to feel your thoughts and you start to reason your emotions. And the way to do that is through intuition. And when you incorporate in your capabilities the field thoughts and the intuitions, you are in a better position to connect the dots from what's going on with yourself and with otherness and to see them differently. For example, one field thought that I talk in the book that helps to nurture the organizational culture with a different purpose, with a purpose that you just mentioned, with a higher meaning for the common good. The current mindset is no one is indispensable. That's the current mindset. You are not indispensable. And if you don't give me the results, well, sorry, I will let you go. That's the way life works. Well, the field thought, it's the other way around. It's you are indispensable. Just think of the emotional impact that an employee, that a person has when his high executive person goes and tells him from you, no one is indispensable, and suddenly goes to you're indispensable. In the first phrase, we feel that we are a resource, that we are disposable, that we are here just to do some work and to go back to our house. But if someone tells you you are indispensable, you start with empowering yourself. And you start to be auto-motivated to do something different because we are indispensable, okay? For example, other way of seeing it, another field thought that I wrote in the book is that you need to earn my trust. The classic, and I talked about, well, I trust you from the beginning. I don't need to earn the trust of no one because I'm not the judge and I'm not in a higher position than anyone else. So I will trust you from the beginning, okay? And for example, another field thought is that moving from I won, I earned, I was promoted, to I gave. We need to talk more about the things we give to each other, to start to recognize the otherness and help them in the development process. We need to go from judging to I will help you, because we currently judge a lot. We need to move from fire him to I believe in second chances. We need to move from leave your problems at home to embrace our suffering. So these field thoughts will help us develop a different organizational culture in our companies for the higher good, for the purpose you just mentioned.
In the chapter, you talk about this word feel thoughts and feel thinking. And obviously it's a combination of feeling and thinking, but as you talk about it, it's feel thinking as someone who's capable of thinking while feeling and feeling while thinking.
That's
and
right.
I appreciate the tone of these things because even you talk about the move from judging to I will help you. It's some of these things are, to me anyway, they're not black and white. But in an earlier chapter, you talk about the power of words and how words create reality. But there's a big difference between judging and evaluating.
Yeah.
Right. So to me, as a leadership coach for years and working with leaders, it's a leader's job to evaluate performance, to evaluate what's working and what's not, and to make decisions on that basis. And that's a leader's responsibility because she's responsible for the resources of the organization, which could be wasted if there's holes in the boat because performance is inadequate, and we need to evaluate what's working and what's not. That's different than judging, which to me, just philosophically, is right and wrong, right?
Yeah.
The person is wrong. There can be a person who is underperforming in the role. Maybe they're not on the right role. They don't have the skills. They're not ready for some of these tasks. It doesn't mean I'm judging this person. It's certainly judging their character or something like that. But I can evaluate that they're not doing a certain task with a great degree of competence, right? And I can be, so I'm just running this past you, and then I want to hear what you think about this, is I can evaluate that performance and still move to that other place of I will help you. I will help you and I will help the organization. Helping you could be providing the skills, giving you a mentor to show you maybe how to do something a little bit better, a balancing workload or job tasks so that someone's more capable of performing at a higher level. May even be, I will help you by helping you figure out what's a better role. But the mindset is not one of judging you as wrong. Hey, you're on your own, you're out, disposable. Comes back to the indispensable, dispensable thing. But to me, the words do have power, and we can still be in roles of leadership. We are making decisions based upon resource use, et cetera, but not shutting out our hearts. Because it's very practical, and I think you point that out in the book. It's very practical to engage our hearts and our feelings as well as our intuition is informing our decision making. Does that fit for you?
Yes, that fits. I will only add the following, Andrew, in the evaluation of the people that we have in the companies. Normally, the evaluation comes from results and competencies or from results and potential.
Only.
Yeah, so I think that we need to add to the equation the person as a whole to see the bottom of the iceberg that is setting up those results in terms of competences and in terms of the output of the evaluation that we are having. Because, for example, we can have a nine box profile, a people that is right targeted at the 9 box, but we don't know the fear in which she or he is acting because she or he doesn't want to lose his job, because he struggles to wake up at 4 a.m. for the situation that he's passing at home. And we just go right away and think that he's a super high potential, but we don't know really the problems that he's having at home and the scarcity and the wounds and the shades and the shadows that he's going through and all the effort that he needs to imprint at work. And the same thing goes to the people that we evaluate with a low performance. We don't know what's going on in their lives because we don't have this time, this space to empathize with total vulnerability to really know what's happening. Because, I have heard cases in which a people was fired and the boss didn't know that his wife was in the hospital treating her for cancer. So, eventually, he will have a low performance because his head is in the hospital in the treatment of her wife. And he just showed up with a low performance, was evaluated for that, or mostly judged by that, unfortunately.
Yes.
And he was let go. So we need to add the personal aspect to every evaluation and every conversation that we have in the workplace. I will just add that to round up the conversation with the concept that I'm bringing up with the field thoughts in the book.
No, beautiful. And another term that I would just want to be sure to include here is you talked about field thoughts, and then you also had this term which I have not seen before called meditaction, which is a combination of meditation and action, which again, just as we're bringing the feelings into the thinking to be broader and more effective and more whole as human beings, we're applying the meditation and bringing action to it. But could you say more about that term?
Yes, well, I brought up that term in the book, Andrew, because I've seen that in the West, the movement of mindfulness has driven society to a more egocentric posture than a well-being posture for the common good. Because I've heard a lot of teachers and masters and coaches talking about that you first, and when you are feeling good, then you can do something for the other. And I go, that's not right. You can always do something for the other. You can meditate and bring that to action for the well-being. Even though that you're in the hospital, lying in the bed of a hospital, you can give a smile to the people that attends you. You can call her by her name or by his name, and you can share a small story of your life. The meditation is bringing to action your feel thoughts, but integrating them with the people that surrounds you, not only being full about yourself. Mindfulness has been wrong driven to I'm full of mind. We need to unlearn, and we need to go to this space of being nothing in order to be able to capture new knowledge that can drive us to different possibilities with humankind, with the people that surround us. That's the main essence of meditation, towards ourselves and towards otherness, always in a balance, not only always yourself or always the otherness, but to have a balance in the actions that you have through the meditations that you have in your reflection, in the reflections of your day.
Beautiful. And what I love about that is just your focus is on the application. I mean, yes, this book has a lot of concepts in it, a lot of reference to a lot of philosophers, some of which I'm familiar with and some of which were new to me. But I appreciate the focus on application, and that's hopefully a consistent focus on this podcast. And I appreciate your bringing these ideas, because it's not just about, oh, I think this is a good idea conceptually. These are things that we can do, we will do. I can talk about how we can do and what the impact is on a very practical level to make our lives better, all of our lives better.
That's right, Andrew. That's right.
Yeah.
And I just gave a seminar. I told you that I gave a seminar this past weekend, and it was based on the ideas and how to apply these ideas. And are applied on my experience and on the experience of many people that I have worked for and that I've seen in my life. So there's a way to apply them for the common good and obviously for your own development.
Yeah. So two things I want to highlight about the book that are not conceptual. Well, three actually. One is the how every chapter begins with a soundtrack, with a song that you think thematically goes with the chapter. So how did you come to that creative, interesting idea as part of the book?
Well, I love music and I love food. So in every chapter, you will find a piece of music and something, some dishes that I love in my life.
Yes.
And I came with the idea because Heartset wants to go deep into an emotional state of connection between us.
Mm-hmm.
And music, it's a very profound channel to bring that emotional space, to have a different reading of the concepts that I'm bringing in the book. So that music sets up the tone in some emotional state that is described in that chapter, because every single piece has a connection with the chapter that I'm writing, and also wants to set this emotional tone so we can be in a better perspective to unlearn and to learn new things.
Mm-hmm. No, beautiful. And music does alter our awareness, our consciousness. I'm just looking at the list of pieces here, from Billy Idol to Frank Sinatra and Queensryche, and of course Rush. That meant a lot to me when you included them, in addition to some classical pieces as well. Did you create a playlist on Spotify or something else that can be shared? Because I'd love to see it. Okay.
Yes, I have two playlists on Spotify. One is called the Heartset Meditation Suite.
Mm-hmm.
It's like more than 2 hours of music, so we can relax ourselves and meditate. And the other playlist is called the Jobs Party, regarding to this biblical person from the Old Testament, Job, which is my hero in terms of the ability to respond and responsibility and the way to give thanks to everything that happens to us daily, no matter what. And the second list is regarding the Jobs Party, because the words and the music in that songs are words that program us to be responsible and to integrate ourselves in our 5 bodies: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and social, and to drive our creativity, intuition, and emotions, also with our reason. So I love those songs, and a lot of very nice and clear messages in the lyrics, so we can learn about them.
Beautiful. Thank you. I will add those to mine. And so you talk about Job's party. So, and in the book, you often, earlier in the book, about the suit of Job and coming to situations wearing that suit of responsibility and making that distinction between Job and Adam, another biblical reference. But I will leave it to the listeners to read the book to learn more about that. And speaking of which, how do people learn more? Where can people get the book. And when we're talking about this, it will be a few months between now and the time this is broadcast. And by that time, the book should be widely available on Amazon in English. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right. It will be available in Amazon in English in a month or so, in the hard copy and also on the digital copy.
Right. And if people want to learn more about you, where can they go?
They can go to my LinkedIn profile, or they can go to my Instagram or to my Facebook or to my website, pablosillas.com, and they can find me and through those channels, Andrew.
Beautiful. Well, I hope they do. They would be wise to do that. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your experience, these materials that I can go back to and will go back to, the music. And yes, I did want to highlight also the way you have accented food. I just thought it was it brings a certain, to me, element of family and connection and joy, while at the same time talking about some very aspirational ideas that can seem sometimes, it's a little out of reach. Oh, but wait, I can almost smell the dish that you're describing in the book. Okay. So I appreciate the balance of those two types of inputs and the energy that brings to the book. So thank you for all of it.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you. I really love talking with you, and I love this space. And thank you very much for your time and having me on your podcast. I really love it.
Of course. Look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to Spirituality in Leadership. If you want to access this wealth of knowledge and insight on a regular basis, please subscribe to the show. Join the network of leaders who want to do and be better. You can go to the site spiritualityinleadership.com or your preferred podcast platform to catch all the episodes and learn more. Until next time, take good care of yourself.